Welcome to Investors Coffee Shop. We're your host, Brian Harte.
Waneta, Jaikarran.
I have been working in the financial industry for over 17 years. I started in New York City and in 2010 expanded my business to Alexandria, Virginia.
I have 3 years of experience in the financial industry. I have written articles that has been published on MarketWatch, Associated Press, Morningstar, and many more.
Investors Coffee Shop is for people who want to learn more about investing, make better decisions, create new streams of income.
Each episode, we will discuss investing in real estate, stocks, bonds, art, antiques, wine, collectibles, and anything that may generate a profit.
Join us at Investors Coffee Shop. Welcome to Investors Coffee Shop. I'm your host, Brian Harte.
Waneta, Jaikarran.
And this is our first episode. We'll be discussing first-time home ownership. We brought in a special guest. Her name's Ashley Hoffman. She'll be discussing with us today all the steps that are required for your first home purchase. Ashley, hello.
Hey, how are you guys? I am Ashley Hoffman. I have been selling real estate for 17 years, mostly in Louisa County, but also the surrounding areas. So mostly Central Virginia, and I specifically specialize at Lake Anna, which is almost like a secondary market vacation resort place. Nice lake here at Lake Anna in Louisa County, but also Orange County and Spotsylvania County.
Excellent. What got you into real estate?
So I was working at a bank for about 3 years, and I just wanted more. I wanted my own schedule. I had kids at the time. I wanted a flexible schedule, which ended up not being actually so flexible after all. But I love this business, and I just wanted to get away from working for someone else. I wanted my own business, and so far it's succeeded.
I have a question. So when you first started, how was your experience? Did you find it really hard to find buyers and sellers, or did they just show up?
So I was super lucky. I feel I grew up in Louisa County. I've never lived anywhere else. I don't care to live anywhere else. And I started in 2005. My son was just born. I remember studying for the real estate exam and thinking oh my gosh, I'll never pass this. I'm raising a newborn son. And I was just super focused to get past that exam, and I got past it, and I put in my notice at the bank.
And this has become a family business now, am I correct? Your husband also joined?
Yeah, it has become a family business. My husband was a federal prosecutor with the Department of Justice for about 15 years, and he saw how busy I was on weekends, especially juggling I don't know, sometimes 7 different clients, separate clients. And I just asked him kindly, hey, what if you got your real estate license and you could just kind of help me on weekends? And he got that, and he came and joined me. And one day he came home, he's like, I kind of like this better than what I'm doing. I think I'm going to do this full time. And so I have my husband, and then we also have a personal assistant who's also our transaction coordinator, and her name is Jalen. So we're a 3-member team.
Your husband's probably much more happier now than he was when he was working his previous job, I'm assuming.
He is, that was stressful, but this is also a very high stress job. It really never ends. When you leave the office at 5 o'clock, it doesn't mean your job ends. So I'm usually answering phone calls up until about 10 o'clock at night.
Wow, that's late.
But he's happy. He's happy that we love what we do and we love helping folks.
Working with first-time home buyers. They're generally nervous. They're all over the place. What would you say? What's that experience like working for them?
I think it's just really important to hire the right agent who's going to guide you the entire time through the process and try to make it a more relaxed environment for you. I think that hiring the right agent is super important. Someone who knows the market and someone who's going to guide you all the way from the start line to the finish line. And I think that puts a lot of ease at buyers.
Well, finding the right agent, obviously that needs to be a top priority for people. How do they find the right agent? How do they know who to look up? There's so many people listed online or on TV.
There's so many agents. And I think that you just have to, I think that my recommendation would be to look for someone who's super busy, someone who's hyper local to that market. Look for reviews, look for 5-star reviews, and don't just look for 2 of them, look for a ton of them, look for at least 70 plus reviews of positive reviews for that agent. I would recommend 5 years experience or more. Look for someone that you can relate to, someone that you can talk to, someone that you can trust. It's almost like if you're having heart surgery. If you're going to have heart surgery, you're going to go to the newest heart surgeon that's never done surgery in his life, or are you going to go to someone who's had a lot of experience in that field? I want to go with the expert in that field.
Is there certain things you can ask a real estate agent to find out their expertise? How do you know if they're lying to you or not? So obviously the first time person who wants to sell a home to you, convince you to sign them up so they can find your
Look,
first home. What do you ask? How do you
r-
know new from rookie or not?
right, you've got to start somewhere, right? And every agent at some point is new. I was new at one point, and I was just very honest with people. I told people, like, look, you're my first client. I want you to trust me. I want you to know that I know what I'm doing. I've been trained. I know what I'm doing. I think you just have to trust that person. Look online.
And have like a lot of transparency when you're
Have a
dealing with.
lot of transparency. You're exactly right. Just be super honest with the buyers or the sellers that you're working with. I think honesty is the key to this.
It is, and it's everything in this industry. No matter what type of financial industry, whether you're in stocks, bonds, or real estate, you depend on that certain level of trust.
You do, and you have to trust the person that you're working with. Know that they have your back all the way through in your best interest.
So let's say I want to buy my first home. What are the first few steps you would say before I get started doing this process?
Right. So I think the most important step for a first-time home buyer is get pre-approved. Talk to a lender first. And it's okay to talk to an agent first, but what you don't want to do is to go out home searching, right? So you have your agent and yourself looking at $500,000 homes, and you show them for days or sometimes even months or years a ton of different homes completely out of their price range. Knowing what you should be looking at first by talking to a lender is super crucial. Know your price range. That way you're not heartbroken in the end. You're not heartbroken and you're not wasting your time. I remember, so this is kind of funny. I remember my first deal ever back in 2005. I had a call. A buyer wanted to go look at homes. I spent probably, I don't know, 20, 30, almost a month working with these buyers. And we looked at homes. They found a home that they loved. Well, I didn't know to ask, are you pre-approved? And I spent all of this time with them. They spent time. They spent, their time, their gas money. Come to find out they didn't qualify for anything. So they didn't get a home in the end. So it's super important to contact a lender first, know what you're looking for, know your price range, know what you can afford to get the home that you need.
How do you find these lenders then? If you need to get pre-approved, how do you go about that? How do you know who to trust? Or, I mean, what is the step? You just go online, Google, and say lender pre-approval?
Right. So that's the easy step. You can go online, find someone, even a lender, like when you're looking for an agent, look for reviews. Your agent, if you contact an agent first, your agent is going to have preferred lenders. I have, of course, my preferred lenders. My clients end up loving them. And I know that they're not someone that's just online. I can contact these folks at 12 o'clock at night and my lender is going to respond to me. If there's any kind of problem, I'm going to know about it first. So your agent can give you a list of preferred lenders that they prefer to work with. And those are the lenders that are going to take best care of you, the buyer.
Would you say it makes more sense to find the real estate agent first before getting pre-approved? So that way they could help you guide you through that?
I absolutely do. The agent's going to know exactly the steps that you need to take, the lenders that are going to best serve your best interest as a buyer.
Okay. So let's say you're pre-approved. So we go from that part. What's the next step after you're pre-approved? Do they discuss with you their dream home, their expectations? What comes next?
Yeah, so the next step is we get together, we talk about what you're looking for in a home, the must-haves in a home, the things that you just cannot live without, the things that are a deal breaker for your home when you're looking for a home. And I help people, move those little items out that they don't want, and we can start looking for a home. House shopping is the most fun part of the whole process.
And then what's the time frame people usually have when buying their first homes? What should be expected? 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, a year? How long does it typically take for someone to find their first home to purchase?
Right. So, I mean, it just depends on the market, right? And it depends on each individual person as well. Some people, their expectations are realistic. Other people, not so much. I would say give it a good month to find exactly what you're looking for. I mean, in this market, it's a little bit harder because as soon as a home hits the market, within days, it's gone. So you can't really sleep on it. You have to almost, if you like it or it fits your needs, you almost have to write at that exact moment. Or you're going to miss out.
But the fast market moving, for people who are saving, what's expected down payment of your first home? Did they prepare
Right.
for
So
it?
there's all kinds of different loan types, and it really depends on the loan type and the lender that you choose. Generally, the lender determines what type of loan is best suited for each buyer. FHA, that's 3.5% down, a regular conventional loan, usually 20% down. There's also VA loans for military folks, past military folks, and that's 100% financing. And then there's also USDA 100% financing. So each lender will tell you what you specifically qualify for and which loan best fits your needs. But there are some great programs that offer 100% financing for buyers. And those are great government-backed programs.
And to get the loans, you got to go through a mortgage broker. And how do you find a mortgage broker that's with the real estate agent you're working with?
That's kind of going back to the other question. Mortgage broker, your agent is going to have someone who they specifically like to work with. And they're going to have a good reputation with that mortgage lender, and they're going to recommend you to that mortgage lender.
So I have a question.
Sure.
I'm in my 20s, actually. I'm 26, sadly so young. And I've been looking into, I don't feel lucky sometimes, but I've been looking into real estate because I'm planning on buying my first big investment. Unfortunately, I'm thinking about going more into condominiums. Now, I'm not sure how familiar you might be.
Yeah, condominiums, there's not a lot in my area, but of course those, that type of real estate is going to have more restrictions, right?
Yeah.
Like what you can do on the exterior, but it can also be easier because it's less maintenance, right?
Yeah, that's what I was looking for. Now, for someone who's like my age group and they're single, they have like a full-time job, what would you recommend for someone like me? Because I'm 26, I kind of want to make my first big purchase. I don't have the resources for a house, like a full-blown family house. So would you recommend me like either a condominium as a starter or just like a one family, small size mini house, if that makes any sense?
Right. It's really a personal preference. I mean, I think condominiums and townhomes are a great option because it's less maintenance for the home buyer.
Okay.
You can still get the same type of conventional loan, whether it's FHA, USDA, depending on your income. And USDA is also depending on your income. You have to be lower income to qualify for USDA. But there are great programs out there for home buyers, such as yourself, first-time home buyers. I recommend whatever makes you happy. I think that if you want like a single family home and you want that big yard, it's just a personal preference.
Thank you.
Well, when people are looking up properties, especially for the first time, there's so much information out there. Would you recommend any certain real estate apps that people can use?
That's actually a great question. I feel like realtor.com and Zillow are the most used commonly apps. I feel like realtor.com is not completely up to date. Sometimes when people click on the property, it doesn't say pending. It'll still say like property for sale. So I don't feel like those are actually like up to date. Sometimes I feel like Zillow may be a little bit more, up to date with what the property is. And Zillow also gives like a history of the listing. So it'll show you what it last sold for. And it also gives a link to the GIS, the county GIS, where you can look up the property history, like the property taxes, what the person paid for it when they originally purchased it, the square footage, all of that good stuff. So I would kind of recommend Zillow over any other real estate app out there.
Now, sometimes when I'm going back to my previous question, when I'm looking at places, I do check out the listing agent, and then I go onto their website. Do you recommend doing that and checking to see what kind of listings they have on their personal website? Do you think?
No, I do. I do think so. And I also have my personal website as well. I think that I do. I think it's great because I think that you can find out more about the agent by going to their personal website versus Zillow. A lot of the properties that you see on their personal website are going to be a little bit different than Zillow because they're going to show only their personal listings. And also Zillow sometimes will connect you with an agent that's not actually the listing agent for that specific property. Some people actually pay Zillow to promote and to advertise. And sometimes the listing agent that you click on for that specific house is not specifically the listing agent for that specific home that you're asking about, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, looking at Zillow, if let's say you see a few houses you like, and then underneath it, it'll say days on the market. What exactly does that mean? And what does that tell you?
Right. So days on market, I mean, to me, days on market is pretty crucial because days on market shows how new and fresh a listing is to the market. The most powerful time for a listing is within the first few days of it hitting the market, especially in this market, and up until about that 30-day mark. And I will say that a lot of buyers agents and buyers use that as leverage for when they present an offer. So if a listing, let's say a listing has been on the market for 3 days and there's a ton of interest, at that point you probably want to go over asking price using an escalation clause to make sure that you get that house that you want. And if it's been on the market for, let's say, 180 days, which it's probably about to expire at that point, at 180 days, you probably have huge leverage over the buyer where you can present an offer much lower than what they're asking, and you're likely to get that. You're likely to get that home.
And on the listing, if it says currently pending, let's say this is the house I absolutely want. I have to have this house, but now it says pending on the app. Does that necessarily mean that the house is sold? What exactly does that mean? And can I still make an offer?
Oh, that's a great question too. So once a home is pending, you can't kick it out of the current contract, right? There's no kick out clause that says that let's present an offer and we can kick the current offer out. That doesn't happen. So once it's pending, it usually means that all the contingencies for that home sale have been met. However, the deal isn't closed until it's closed. We all know that in real estate. Recently, I actually had a buyer who reached out and the house was pending. It wasn't my listing, but I looked online on the MLS and it was pending. And he was like, I really want this house. Like, this is the house of my dreams. I'm like, all right, well, let me reach out to the agent, see how the deal's going, and I'll be back in touch. Well, it was very odd, but during that walkthrough, the buyer, for no specific reason, decided, I don't want this home. I'm just not going to close on it. So my buyer presented a backup offer, and I'll always, as a listing agent, accept backup offers. That way, if my deal doesn't work out, I have a backup offer to move to, right? And my clients, who were the buyers, actually ended up getting this property, and they successfully closed on it. So they were the happiest campers in the world. So I would say that just because a home is pending, it's not too late to put a backup offer in.
Don't give up hope yet. It's still possible.
Don't give up hope.
But also don't get too excited.
A deal is never done until it's signed and delivered to the courthouse.
So I have a question. Have you ever had like a situation where you're getting a house from a seller, but it hasn't been listed yet? But you probably, this is just an example, by the way, I should say that. But you're like showing it to prospective buyers who might be interested, and you tell them it's going to be listed in maybe 2 weeks. Have you ever had like a situation where a buyer's like, I want this house before it gets listed, or it's not allowed? Or
no, I absolutely have. I've had, and that's the secret, but I'm in a very distinct, like a very unique market. I'm at Lake Anna. Like I said, very secondary market almost. A lot of my clients are from Northern Virginia. A lot of times the homes are off sale, they're off market sales. I do. Sometimes I'll meet a client, a buyer wants to see it. Like I have someone looking for the specific kind of home, and I already know that. Like I know that they want this type of water view. I know that they want this type of home. So I take my buyer there, and the house never hits the market. That's probably not the smartest situation for a seller to be in, though, in this specific market. In this market, I recommend that every home does hit the market, just because you're probably going to get a multiple offer situation, and it's probably going to go for more than what I can sell it for off market. But that has happened before.
Off market real estate, is that generally high end homes?
It is. It's more so high end homes or very, very desperate buyers who don't want to get into the multiple contract situation or the multiple offer situation.
And when someone's buying their first home, what are the most common mistakes that they generally make?
Most commonly, general mistakes that a buyer can make would be not getting pre-approved first. Just, wasting your time going around and looking at homes, not even knowing what price range you should be looking at. I would say that is the biggest mistake that buyers make. Sometimes people just don't understand the process. That's why I think it's important to have the agent first, understand what needs to happen before you even go out looking at properties. I also think that buyers sometimes they move too fast. They don't really know if they love the home or if they have enough money in their bank account after closing for any unexpected emergency repairs.
And when people are looking to buy their first home, would you recommend them starting from scratch, like buy a lot of land and build their dream home, or just buy an older home already on the market?
That's a great question too. So I feel like new construction, I feel like is a great option for first-time home buyers. Really, because first-time homes, if it's a new construction, they come with a 1-year builder warranty. That is the law in the state of Virginia. So buy a new construction home. Once you close, you have a 1-year home warranty with that builder. That 1-year mark, you go through the home with the builder again. You describe or note any problems that you're having with the home, and the builder fixes those problems. If you're buying a home or a resale, you don't know really what you're getting into, right? So maybe it needs a new roof. Do you have the money saved up for a new roof or a new HVAC system? I think those are important factors to take in for any first-time home buyer.
That brings us up to the home inspections. So before you buy, you always want to get a home inspection, but there are times when the seller may be in a crunch or want to sell it without a home inspection. What would you tell a first-time home buyer if the seller is pushing no home inspection as is?
So, that's a great question. But in my market, I never see where a seller says, I'm not even allowing home inspections. Really, more specifically, I feel like in this market, I feel like a seller is more likely to accept an offer that says home inspection with option of void only, the buyer's not asking for repairs. And that's what I'm seeing more so in this market. And it's very secure for a seller because they know that they're not going to be making repairs. They know the worst option is that the buyer could void within that 7-day inspection period. And if the buyer's not happy with the home inspection within that 7-day contingency, they can release the contract and they can receive their full earnest money deposit back. So the only money that they're out is really their home inspection fee. But I would always recommend a home inspection. I personally would never buy a home without a home inspection. You don't know what you're getting into. They could be hiding something. And in the state of Virginia, they really are required to disclose any known defects with the home. But let's be real, is everyone honest?
What is a contingency? What is a contingency?
Yeah, so a contingency, once you go under contract, every contract is going to have certain contingencies in it. So let's say you want a home inspection. Mm-hmm. You're going to have a set number of days in there for the home inspection, whether that's 7 days or 10 days or 14 days. The buyer will have up to 14 days to have a home inspection done. And any repairs that they want to ask the seller to do, they have to submit those requests within that 14-day contingency. Mm-hmm. And then that brings up another question, what about the appraisal? Usually there's a 21-day minimal appraisal contingency. So the appraisal has to happen within 21 days. Every contingency has a different mark. And I'm in a rural area, so a lot of times there's water, well, septic, termite, all of those contingencies. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, so I'm assuming an all cash contingency is the best offer a seller can possibly get. If a buyer's be like, I'm giving you all cash, 10-day notice, you don't have to go through any red tape when they're selling their home. Is it hard to beat an all cash offer?
No, all cash is always a beautiful thing, but I feel like a lot of times buyers with cash feel like they have a ton of leverage, which really they don't in this market here at Lake Anna, because the seller only cares what they net. They don't care if someone comes in, if they're asking, let's say they're asking $400,000 for their home. If a buyer comes in with $200,000 cash, the seller doesn't care about that. They only care about what they're going to net at the end of the sale. So they're more likely to accept a buyer with a contingency of financing for $400,000 over the $200,000 cash mark. Because even cash buyers, a lot of times they want inspections, and there's still contingencies even in that cash buy.
But going back to the home inspections and the importance, let's say it comes back, you need to repair the roof and XYZ, a lot of other things that gets done. Generally, I'm guessing, I remember when I was buying my first home, I would put in the offer now, please fix the back door, please fix this, and then we'll pay you XYZ. And the seller generally will pay for that. Is there ever a point where, let's say, a whole roof's gone, he replaces the roof, and then you have to get the house appraised again, and then the value of the home goes up? Is that a situation that has ever happened?
It can be a situation, but likely more so. I sold a home last year that was a $120,000 deal. And in my description of the listing, I put that the seller was going to replace the siding and the seller was going to put a new roof on. If the appraiser comes out before those items are done, he's going to make that appraisal contingent upon those items being done. And then the appraiser is going to want to do a re-inspect. But if the appraiser doesn't know really what's happening at the house, he's not going to put a contingency on that appraisal, if that makes sense.
So he'll know in advance. You'll tell him in advance, well, he's going to do X, Y, Z. And then he'll give you two
That's
prices,
right.
the one before and the one after.
They really don't give you two prices. They're going to give you one price and they're going to make it contingent upon it closing. They're not going to let that home close until that siding and that roof is done, if that's what the listing says. And then they're going to come back out and make sure that that actually was done. They're going to take pictures and they're going to submit that appraisal to the lender to get the clear to close. They want to make sure that what they are putting down is absolutely accurate, because the lender doesn't want to they don't want to give a loan if everything's not done.
No, that makes sense. Well, then what's the difference between the appraisal price you get and the cost of the home that you see listed online or that you're doing the offer?
Right. So the appraisal price of the home and the price that it goes under contract for, the price that it goes under contract for is really, it's a mutual agreement between the buyer and the seller. The appraised value is when the appraiser comes in and, he really has all control, right? Because he can tell you, he makes the final decision of what this home is actually worth. And I will tell you that last year I probably had 8 appraisals that came in low. So I kind of felt like a hero. I'm like, man, I can sell ice to an Eskimo because I sold this home for $500,000, but the appraiser is saying it's worth $400,000. Really, that's not a good situation to be in, because it creates a huge problem, right?
Yeah.
Because the lender doesn't want to give a loan on $500,000 if it's only worth $400,000 to the appraiser. So what happens in that situation? You can renegotiate, the buyer and the seller, and obviously I negotiate on that, at that point, but we can renegotiate a new sales price, or you can withdraw the contract if the seller's absolutely not. The buyer said they'd pay this for it, I'm not budgeting. That happened a ton of times. But what I've seen more so happen is the buyer comes up with the additional cash to close.
Has there ever been a situation where that happens and the buyer just backs out of the deal?
Absolutely, because sometimes sellers can be stubborn, buyers can be stubborn. Mm-hmm. We're all stubborn sometimes. But I've probably had 2 deals last year where they actually fell apart because, and one of them I was a buyer's agent, but the house I wrote on was listed at 1.9 million, and I wrote an offer at 1.7, and the appraisal came in at 1.5. My buyer wasn't willing to budge a penny, and the seller was not willing to budge a penny. So we released a contract. And it's a bummer when that happens.
So would that be considered? Now this is where I'm going to get my terminology confused. I know. Is that before escrow or after, during escrow?
So it's after escrow. But if that's, if you have an appraisal that comes in low and no one can negotiate the sales price where the buyer and the seller mutually agree upon a new sales price, the buyer will get that escrow money back. So the buyer's not really out anything. They're out a home and they're out their home inspection fee, but they're getting that deposit back returned to them.
And just so I understand the appraisal process, to make this sound simple, so you find the house you love, you put an offer in, you get an appraisal for it. Your loan is dependent on what that appraisal goes for.
Yeah, your loan is dependent upon that unless the buyer has waived the appraisal process, which in this market, I am seeing more of that. But you've got to, that's a tricky situation. You've got to be really prepared as a buyer. If this home doesn't appraise, I have X amount of dollars sitting in the bank account, so I can cover the difference. And you don't know when an appraiser is going to appraise their home at. Sometimes you get appraisers that are not local to the market. And I will say, sometimes you get a bad appraisal. They don't know the true value of the home in that certain market. They're not super hyper to the market, that local market.
So should you get a second opinion on appraisal if it's not what you like, or
hard, right? So as a buyer's agent, if you ask for a second appraisal, that's not going to happen. The lender's no. What you can do as an agent is you can rebuttal the appraiser. And that means putting up an argument and proving your facts with comps. Hey, this home sold for X amount of dollars. This home sold for X amount of dollars. Why is mine coming in low? But that appraiser doesn't have to budge on they don't have to budge on their price. The appraiser is like at the top of the pyramid, and they kind of have the ruling over everything.
Have you had to do that before?
I
Tried to get the
have.
appraisal, and has it worked, or it was pointless?
Yeah, so a lot of times it does work. And then, a few times appraisers are stuck in their ways and they just don't see the value in the home, unfortunately, and you're kind of screwed, to be honest.
So when do you walk away from a deal? Like, what would be would this be a good situation where just no one's agreeing on anything? Would they walk away?
I, as an agent, I would say I would never walk away from a deal unless my client was getting screwed, or if my buyer is approaching a contingency deadline where no one's coming to a negotiation, where they're not coming to an agreement where it works out for the buyer or the seller. That's really the only time I would back out of a contract, or I would recommend my buyer or seller back out of a contract, is if I'm coming up on a contingency and there's no agreement that's been met. Otherwise, I'm always going to fight for my client, whether it's a buyer or the seller. I'm going to fight for my client to the end. Most of the time that works.
I was wondering, so when you look at the house, you go visit the house, you go to an open house, and then they tell you this is the size of the land. Should you hire a surveyor to make sure you know exactly what the lot size is before you put an offer in? Is this a thing people do?
Right.
Or is this something that's really not a concern?
That's a good question. A survey by a lender is not required. It's very odd, but a lender does not require that a survey be done unless it's a new build, because at that point they're going to want a site plan. They're going to want to see the layout of the land. But if it's just a resale, a lender is not going to require a survey to be done. To me, as an agent, it's always a good idea to have one done, because you never know the exact property lines. You never know if there's encroachments on the property. I will tell you right now, currently, I listed a property. It was a piece of land, and the next door neighbor called me, and the neighbor actually cussed me out. And the neighbor, I'm like, what in the hell's happening? But the neighbor cussed me out and said, "Your seller, you need to get over here because the surveyor is on my property." Well, come to find out, that neighbor that cussed me out, their driveway is on the property that I'm selling.
Oh, wow.
Right. So you really never know. I recommend a survey just so you know that there's no encroachments on your property.
So if that's a situation where her driveway was on now your property, let's assume you bought the home.
Mm-hmm.
Can you make her get rid of that driveway on your property technically, or is that part of the new home purchase?
No, she's going to have to get rid of that driveway. It's probably going to go to court, and she's going to have to move her driveway over just a few inches. But she called very, very mad, and she thought that I was the buyer's agent, which I'm not. And she's like, "Well, you're responsible for the survey." I'm like, "No, I don't know who the surveyor is, because the surveyor was hired by the buyer's agent. I don't know who's out there surveying the property." But she was very, very angry. And I contacted my seller. He was like, "No, these are the exact property lines." He knew the property lines, but she's going to have to move her driveway over probably 5 inches.
So when in doubt, get a surveyor.
Always,
That's
always.
Right. It seems like that should be required.
Yeah,
Just
you
to
would think
save
that it
everyone
would
the
be, but
headache.
it's not. And you would think that it would be.
But what are the key words you hear real estate agents using to describe their homes, whether it's on Zillow or discussing with their clients? Usually it could be misleading, like saying, "I have a hidden gem here," and that can mean absolutely nothing. But what would you say are code words that real estate agents use?
I think every agent, listing agent specifically, is going to try to amp that property up, whether it's gorgeous or beautiful. They want to get their home sold, right? They want to get their listing sold. I think that every listing agent is going to describe their home in the most glorious way possible. I feel like that's why it's important for every buyer to get out there and see the home for themselves, to make sure that they like the property. I never like selling property sight unseen, because pictures can always be somewhat different than what the listing kind of describes. And a lot of times I get buyers out there and the rooms look so much bigger in photographs than they do in person. So I feel like the most important key words to look out for, not necessarily how the listing agent is describing it, but I feel like you need to be on the lookout for sold as is, or Owners not doing any repairs. Like those are the words that we need to be on the lookout for, more so than beautiful or glorious or glamorous or a gorgeous property.
Okay. And that goes with the photos online you were discussing. Are there any tricks we should be watching out for when you look at these things online that people do?
Every listing agent, if they're smart, is going to hire a professional photographer to come in. I know I always do. I'm not going to take my own pictures of a property because I'm not a photographer. I'm a real estate agent. So I hire a professional to come in. And yeah, I do feel like professional photographers sometimes they use wide angle lenses. They make the rooms look a little bit bigger than what they really are. So I feel like that's the main complaint that I hear from buyers is, wow, this room looks so much bigger online than what it is now. But once they actually get the feel of the property, they're usually okay with the room is smaller than what it looked like online. But I think that that's the biggest trick that photography plays, making the room look bigger.
And on your search, finding the different types of homes, there's all sorts of different homes, as we know, modern style, Victorian, the list can go on. But what are the most common types of homes do you think are appropriate for first-time home buyers to look at?
Right. Well, the most common popular type of home right now, especially in my market, is a craftsman style home. It's those big columns with the white columns with the big stone at the bottom of them, vertical siding. In some cases, you'll see the gray and white walls, white cabinets, white counters, lots of white. You probably have seen the black pane windows. Those are a huge hit right now. I feel like the craftsman style home is the most popular home on the market right now. I feel like most buyers are looking for that trendy craftsman style home. I feel like ranchers are never going to go out of style. The one level living where everything is offered on the main level, especially for older folks who don't want to climb stairs every time they want to go to bed. And I feel like colonials will never go out of style. They're very traditional. Everyone loves them, and they've been around for a long time. And I feel like those are the types of homes that people are looking for.
I will say from my experience, our first home, we bought a ranch, and we had our first son who was born, Oliver. And when he would cry in the crib, it was much easier just to walk across the hall to go check him out instead of climbing up the stairs or climbing down the stairs. I definitely appreciated having a ranch home when they were as a baby. Now, not so much. I wish I could just throw them upstairs and be done with them as they get older.
It's so
I
much
don't own a
easier,
home,
right?
so.
I mean,
Yes.
I'm building a home right now, and we're supposed to move in on Tuesday. Been delayed like several times, but it is what it is. But our main bedroom, our primary bedroom, is on the main level, and all of the kids are upstairs for a certain reason.
Yeah, that's what I need to do. So I'm probably going to have to hire you to get my second home with a second story added because they're driving me crazy.
Oh, wait till they get to like teenage years, and then they're definitely going to drive you crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Mine are in the teenage years.
Yeah.
So what goes wrong generally? What would you say the most common things that go wrong when buying your first home? Past not pre-approval. Let's say you bought it. Okay, you helped them buy the home. What are a few common things that go wrong when you buy a house?
Now, like I said, going back to the first thing, like you just mentioned, looking for a home before applying for a mortgage. I think you need to know what price range you're looking for. Every listing agent that has a home listed is going to require a pre-approval letter when you submit that offer. That offer is worthless without a pre-approval letter. That's one of the biggest mistakes that I see. Talking to only one lender. Shop around, see which lender offers you the best product, see which lender offers you the best interest rate. One size doesn't fit all, right? And I think moving too fast, I think sometimes buyers get ahead of themselves by just thinking like, I want to own a home. And they're focusing too much on that certain home instead of focusing on the actual neighborhood. Sometimes I feel like location is everything, and in real estate, it really is. So just because a home looks perfectly perfect or beautiful around a bunch of condemned homes, it's probably not the best investment for you. Let's be honest. I feel like you should probably buy a better home that's in a better community where the values are just going to go up. You always want to have, and I shouldn't say this, but you always want to have probably the less valuable property in the neighborhood as a home buyer. Your values are only going to go up. You don't want to be the biggest home in your neighborhood.
You think this would help with buyer's remorse, buying a
I
smaller home in the neighborhood and things like that?
I
that you
do.
were
I think
mentioning?
I do. I think it would help tremendously with buyer's remorse. And I think buyer's remorse comes from, a lot of times buyers, first time home buyers, they become house broke, and that's not fun. Like we want to do things in life, right? We want to go on vacations, we want to go out to eat. But if you if you move too fast sometimes and you're going exactly for what the lender tells you that you qualify for, you're going to be house broke. Just because the lender tells you that you qualify for 420 doesn't mean you should go spend 420. Maybe you should go for 250 so you can be happy and enjoy an equal life.
So who pays for the commission to the buyers and sellers agents?
So standard, the seller always pays commissions at closing, and it doesn't come out of pocket up front. It usually comes out of the actual closing disclosure, like from their net proceeds. The seller usually, that's standard. The seller always pays commissions in the state of Virginia. There's certain situations where if it's a for sale by owner, a buyer sometimes is committed to paying the buyer's agent commission if they want buyer representation. But I think it's smart to have buyer representation in any situation because you don't really know a for sale by owner and what they're actually selling to you.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably shouldn't trust a for sale by owner versus using a real estate broker.
Not in all situations, but I think in most situations, I think it's important to have an agent. I think that a lot of times, if it's for sale by owner, they're not going to be required to disclose all the rules and regulations of a home. They're not required to disclose what's wrong with the home. But if you have an agent, they know the legalities of, all the procedures and what's supposed to be disclosed and what's not. I think you're just a little bit more protected when it's not a for sale by owner.
So going into buyer's remorse, if you spend too much on your house, then you become your house poor. You don't want that. So this is where you would use the debt to income ratio. It's a term I've heard all over the place. I don't exactly know what it means. Can you explain what the debt to income ratio is and how first time home buyer can use this?
Yeah, so every lender is going to do the debt to ratio income. It's a comparison of your monthly debt payment compared to all of your income, used by lenders to determine how enough, do you have enough income to pay your mortgage after paying all of your monthly bills? And a lot of that depends on each individual lender. Some lenders have a less, debt to ratio income, but the majority of them are going to look at exactly how much money you have left over after paying your regular bills. Can you make your mortgage payment? So that plays a crucial factor in when you're buying a home.
So how often do people, once they find out their debt to income ratio, they say, okay, I can afford $2,000 a month, but to get my dream home, I need $2,400 a month. How often do people push it up to the $2,400 a month, or should they just stay at the $2,000 and just walk away from that?
Unless the buyer is gonna end up paying off, and a lot of times, like that's why I love my preferred lenders. They will tell my buyer exactly what they need to do to get to where their dream needs to be. So let's say they have a medical bill that's $2,000 and they're paying $300 a month on it. My lender will give them like a breakdown, like you need to pay this amount of money off each month, and then you'll be free and clear of that debt, and then we can move on to where your dream home is. So I feel like I love my preferred lenders, and I feel like they play a crucial part in the whole sales process because they're going to do what's best for my for my buyer. I'm sorry. They're going to do what's best for my buyer. And I feel like that's pretty crucial. They're going to say what's best for them.
So I have a silly question here to ask you. Have you ever had, say, you sold the house to a client and a couple months later they call you up and they're like, I kind of regret spending X, Y, and Z more. Have you ever had like that situation where they're like, oh, I can't believe I spent $20,000 more, but the market value of their house went up that same price? Have you ever had like that kind of situation where they know they can't afford it, but they end up like still sticking with it even though the house value?
I do. I feel like I had that happen more in my earlier career where a buyer, they closed on the home, they really couldn't afford it. And 2 years later, they lost the home in foreclosure, which that made me super, super sad. Luckily now I am very sensitive to what my buyers are buying. If I feel like it's a horrible deal, I'm going to tell my buyers, I just want to be the honest agent. And the reason for that is because I don't want my buyers, my friends, my people who trust me to turn around in 2 years and say, I need to sell my home. I need you to sell it. I don't want to ever be in a position where I can't sell a home for exactly or more than what they paid for it. And that's very, very important to me as an agent.
I know in Northern Virginia, I don't know so much in Central Virginia, we have a lot of military here, a lot, and they come and go. quite often, and they buy homes, and then 6 months later, they may end up having to sell it. If somebody is traveling a lot in the military, would you recommend them still buying their first home and maybe coming back to it, or just continuing renting until they know for sure they're able to stay at that first home?
That's a good question. My sister-in-law and my brother-in-law are active military. He is in the Navy. They live in Fort Bragg. They purchased their first home, and anytime that he gets deployed or they're moving to a different state, they rent it out. So I think that you just need to be in that situation where you are comfortable renting the house out, renting a new home, and then when you move back, that you still have that home.
And then while looking for new homes, let's say we haven't bought yet, let's go back to looking. The price per square foot. You see that different price, even though the houses may be the same on the same block, they're priced differently. What exactly does that detail more? And is it truly an important thing to look at?
It's very weird for an agent to say, but I don't feel like price per square foot is that important, especially in my market. I feel like if you were in a traditional market and you were looking at traditional homes, I feel like price per square foot could make a difference, especially with the appraiser. But I feel like in the market that I'm in at Lake Anna, you're paying for the waterfront and you're paying for the waterfront lot. So I see price per square foot kind of all over the board. Sometimes it's $559 a square foot. Sometimes it's $600 a square foot. Other times it's $100 a square foot. Sometimes standard is $250 a square foot. Just depends on the market that you're in. So I can't say that price per square foot is super, super important. It almost depends on what a buyer is willing to pay for a home.
And now interest rates may be going up, as has been the big talk on Wall Street. And as interest rates go up, generally prices come down. Do you think this will be the same for the real estate market?
I do not. So no, I do not think that we'll see values of homes drop quickly or even at all. Inventory is too low for this to happen right now. I feel like the experts, and I know that the experts project that for the next 5 years, home values will still increase as interest rates start to rise. Buyers may not be able to afford as much because the interest rates will increase the monthly payment, but I don't feel like the prices of the homes will actually decrease much.
Well, I guess now is definitely a good time to lock in those low interest rates while we can.
It's a weird market. I feel like it's still like an exceptional time to sell. It's a seller's market, but I still also feel like it's an exceptional time to buy. Like people need to lock in these interest rates while they're still here before they creep up too much higher. And I do think they'll creep up probably 3 times in the next year. But the inventory is still low where it's not going to affect sellers too much.
With the inventory being so low, are people coming in and offering more for the asking price, or are they asking less than the offering price? I mean, how do you go about that? When do you know to ask for more or when to ask for less?
You mean as a buyer?
Yes.
As a buyer, it's super crucial for their agent, the buyer's agent, to be in touch with the listing agent. You have to be in close contact with the listing agent. Anytime a home hits the market, that buyer's agent should be on the phone with that listing agent probably 4 times a day. How much interest do you have? Do you have any offers yet? When is the seller going to make an offer deadline? It's super crucial for that agent to be in close contact with the listing agent, to know what exactly is going on. And that will determine what the buyer ends up offering on that home.
Have you ever been in a situation where the seller accepted like a lowball offer? I doubt you probably have, but have you ever been in a situation where you've seen the seller was like, this house has been on the market for so long, I'll accept a lowball offer?
Yes, I have. So that goes back to the days on the market. Yeah. So the seller, I mean, once a home is on the market, I mean, sometimes you'll see homes on the market for 2 years here, right?
Wow.
And a seller is more likely to accept a lower offer at that point because they almost at that point feel like my home is never going to sell. This is my only chance to sell this home. And so I do feel like that's possible.
That could be a good thing to the buyer.
It's a great thing for the buyer. It's huge leverage for a buyer.
Yeah.
So when people come up to you, especially buying their first time home, have all these grand ideas of what they want and unrealistic realities sometimes for the average person. Obviously, there'll be some people who do have the means to get everything they want. But for the average person, how realistic is it going to be for them to get everything that they want on their list?
It's not very realistic. I think that for the first time home buyer, they have to figure out first, what location do they want? And they have to make a list and prioritize, like, what are the most important things to me? Is it location? Is it location to my work? Is it location to my school? Is it granite countertops? Is it a more updated house? Like, they have to make a list of what their what their priorities are. And from that list, I can help them decide which home is best for them. And then I continuously send them to them. But a lot of times people, they want the moon for nothing. And sometimes it's just not possible. And so I have to bring in reality to them. Like, look, you can get this home and this is a great deal. This is not going to happen again. You should move forward. And you just have to be direct with buyers sometimes. Sometimes I think that they need just direction for what's best for them and what's impossible and what's possible for them.
Have you ever been in a situation where they are at escrow and somebody they just fall out at escrow because they changed their mind and they don't like how the kitchen looks? So
no, I have. Like, if you can think about real estate, everything and anything has happened. Yeah, I have. I've had people where they get to the walkthrough and they're like, I don't want this home. I'm like, oh my gosh. I've even had one, this is almost comical, but we went through one. We had a property listed for $8 million and a buyer, and we spent so much time. Like, this is a hard job. People don't realize, and I feel like everyone wants to get their real estate license because they think it's easy money. This is not easy money. This is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and so much time away from your family. But I had a buyer who wanted to go look at this property that I had listed for $8 million, and she claimed that she won the lottery. Well, when I asked for the pre-approval, she submitted me a fake lottery winning. And we had she went through, I know it's comical right now. I can laugh now, but she went through all of the home inspections. She spent thousands of dollars on soil work and making sure the property perked for additional homes on the property. And come to find out, she randomly called one day and she's like, so the lottery said I don't get the money right away and I'm going to have to wait a few years to actually get the money. Well, I contacted, me, I'm not going to just give up. Oh, she didn't get her money in time. No, I'm not that person.
So when did you realize he was lying about it?
Such person on file. I'm like, oh my gosh. I just spent 2 months of my life going back and forth to this property 45 minutes away. And this lady, she's just lost her mind. She's just come to find out she just wanted revenge on her family. She was telling her family, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to build you a home here. I'm going to build you a home here. There's so much horseshit sometimes.
Wow.
That's extreme. Okay.
That's a long time right there.
But you know what? It's a good learning experience. It's a great, from my experience, I should have, when she gave me the Virginia lottery paper, I should have contacted Virginia Lottery at that point. But I'm a super trusting person. I trust everyone until I don't.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it she was a big fan of that TV show, The Lottery. I can't think of the name of it.
So, right?
Yeah.
You know what? It's a lesson learned, and it's funny now. I can laugh about it now, but at the time, representing my seller, I'm like, this is not funny. This is horrible. How am I going to break this news to my seller?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's horrible. If I was selling my house and I found out what I thought was a closed deal wasn't even close to being a closed deal.
You don't understand how many people she had out there. She had septic people out there, and she had contractors out there, and she had builders out there, and she
was really selling this.
Oh, she was, and you would believe it. She was so believable.
So after the whole process, so we found our real estate agent. We threw in our offer. It got accepted. We've gotten our appraisal. Everything looks good. We've gone through the walkthrough. Now we're at closing. So we're dealing with the closing cost and everything like that. For a person who may not know, what are the closing costs when you're summing up everything?
Of course. So closing costs for a seller are, minimally none almost. It's usually 1% of the sales price. Closing costs usually go off the sales price of the home. And for a seller, it's usually at least 1%. The seller is going to be, and commissions are separate than closing costs. So they're going to have their 6% typically in closing and commissions. And then they're going to have their closing costs, which is, title fees, all of that good stuff to do the title search. For buyers, it's going to be a lot of loan fees, which generally run about 3% of the sales price of the home. So buyer's going to need 3% of whatever their sales price is to close on their home. A lot of times a buyer can ask the seller to pay their closing cost up to 3%. Many times that means you need to raise the sales price of the home to ask for the seller to pay the closing costs. So at least the seller is getting at least the asking price, if that makes sense.
So the closing, just to sum it up so it makes, in my head so it makes sense. So the closing cost will generally be about 3%.
For a buyer.
So you need, for the buyer, so you need to have that extra 3% cost already with you before you buy the home. Or you can ask the seller to cover the cost up to 3%.
That's right.
And he can do that by raising the price of the home. So that way it doesn't come out of your bank account today.
That's right. And a lot of times, like I tell buyers, a lot of buyers come to me and I love my first time home buyers. And, a lot of first time home buyers come to me and they're like, I don't have any money in the bank. That's okay. Like we can go up and we can, let's say a property is listed for $250. Let's go up and offer $259 and ask the seller to pay 3% of the closing cost. That way the seller is still netting more than the asking price.
And then once the closing cost is done, everything's been paid, we've now collected our keys, we get to walk into our new home. What are the additional costs after buying our home that we should be prepared for? How much should we have saved for like painting or, what are the common things that need to be done before you move in?
Right. So that, that really depends on each personal buyer and each personal seller. Maybe the seller had the house professionally cleaned. Some sellers don't. I always recommend that you have at least a good $5,000 to $10,000 in the bank account, in your bank account for any emergencies. Let's say you need a new roof, you need a new HVAC. Also for first-time home buyers, I recommend that we ask for the seller to pay a home warranty. If the seller doesn't want to pay that, then maybe, it's worth the buyer to pay $500, $598 to have a 1-year home warranty through a home warranty company, where if the HVAC goes out, they pay a service call and the home warranty company covers the rest of the expenses. And I find
is it common for people to get that? Is that?
It's not complicated. Like even myself, like I own 4 different homes. On every home that I have a home warranty on it. And I know that my HVAC went out at my rental home a couple of years ago, and I contacted the home warranty company, and they came out. I had to pay an $80 service fee. They replaced the entire HVAC. Sometimes it's not super easy, and you have to argue with them, but I can do that. I was very persistent. I argued with the home warranty company, and what do you know? I have a new HVAC system put in my rental home for $80.
You can't beat that. And we had to replace ours when we bought the house. We didn't have the home warranty, so that's something I wish we would have had or would have been told in the beginning.
And if the seller doesn't offer the home warranty at closing, any buyer can contact the home warranty company. Let's say it's 210 Home Warranty or American Home Shield. You can contact those home warranty companies, pay for the home warranty, and you're paying for, let's say, $500 a year. And that warranty, you can renew it every single year for the life of the home. And it covers any major defects, appliances, let's say the well pump or the septic or the HVAC goes out. That home warranty is going to cover those huge expenses for a service fee.
Ashley, this has been extremely informative, and I appreciate you taking your time to discuss all this stuff. Sum things up. What would you say the top 4 things a new home buyer should look out for?
I think the top things that home buyers should look out for is just hiring the right agent, making sure you're pre-approved, making sure it's a location that you want to be in, and just being in love with your home. You don't want to close on a home that you're not completely happy with. I don't want to sell someone a home that they're not completely happy with. And I think that you just have to be in a comfortable position where you're not house poor, so you can actually live a life. If you want to go on vacation, you can still take those vacations. If you want to go out to eat, you can still go out and enjoy that luxury as well. Just know what you're looking for.
We appreciate you spending the time with us. We look forward to seeing you on the next few episodes. We'll be discussing other things in real estate. Excellent. I truly enjoyed this. I enjoyed getting to know you, and the information is definitely valuable. I will talk to you guys soon.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, hit subscribe and leave a review.
And we'll see you next time at Investor Coffee Shop.